Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hello, folks. And wouldn't it be fun, Jackie, to know how many of our viewers actually were baby boomers? Wouldn't that be cool? Comment below if you have been a baby boomer and can honestly relate to a lot of these stories that our guests tell. And today is another very unique conversation about that time period. Jackie, can you
Indeed.
lead that?
Yes. Viewers, as always, I appreciate it if you would cast your eyes to the bottom where you see that purple banner. www. While the Windmill Watch is where you'll get all sorts of information about the book, about the authors, where they might be speaking, who the vendors are, where they're located, and of course, this 1950s fun chat. You'll be able to click on all of those fun chats that we've previously had within the last 2+ years. Very interesting modern history of the 1950s before and beyond. So also look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see the book, While the Windmill Watched, a Slice of Rural America in the 1950s, the book that sort of kick-started these chats. Mm-hmm. You will see on the bottom there's that little white dot, and it is a very special little icon. It is the 2022 National Independent Press Award. This book was in the regional nonfiction category as the distinguished favorite. So the little book is very proud to wear that little icon. So now let's begin. The two criteria for the 1950s Fun Chat guests are having been born during the decade of the 1950s or having been influenced by the 1950s. This guest fits into the second category. Deb Pullen-VanAuken was born in 1961 and raised in Waterloo, Iowa. She's a graduate of Iowa State University, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in agricultural business with a specialization in finance. Her education prepared her for a career in banking, from which she retired 2 years ago. Now, Deb lives now, spends time, with her family's flock of registered Hampshire sheep that are shown at the national level. Her family has been raising sheep for over 100 years, and this year they're celebrating 98 years of registering and showing Hampshire sheep. So Deb spent her entire banking career and now retirement in community service through various organizations and events. She's married with 2 stepchildren and 3 grandchildren. Deb is now the National Cattle Congress Board President. She resides near Waterloo, Iowa. So Deb, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Your family has been raising and showing sheep for almost a century, including the 1950s. So how has showing livestock evolved through the years?
So really, livestock fairs, or fairs in general, started as an agricultural event. For example, the National Cattle Congress started in 1910 as the state dairy show, and then evolved from there. And the reason that they started this was because all of the really good cattle and the genetics were on the East Coast. And they said, we really need to improve our flocks here because the cattle over on the East Coast are producing so much more milk, much more efficient, making the farmers more money. And so they wanted to improve, have a way, an incentive for people to improve the dairy cattle in the Midwest. So it started out as a very agricultural, rural type of event. And then as fewer people were on the farm and more people were urban, it also evolved into a more urban setting. So it needed to appeal to those people as well. So the fairs have really evolved into a totally different type of event with a lot of the past held on with the shows. Because, for example, when we show, it isn't just a competition. We love the competition. But really, we want to show people what our genetics look like so that they then want our genetics and want to buy our sheep because we have breeding sheep. And so it's very important for us to showcase those genetics, which we also do through Facebook. But fairs are really a really good way for people to actually see our sheep, especially now with live streaming the shows.
Mm-hmm. Deb, and one time, and maybe you still do, was there a fair circuit that your family would be involved with?
Yeah, well, and you think about the 1950s, they were starting, oh, I should back up just a little bit. So really, livestock was moved by rail for a long time. They would move from show to show in the boxcars, and my grandfather would talk about that. Well, then as you got the bigger trucks that farmers could use to haul the livestock from one place to another, they would run these circuits. The rails would run the circuit, but then these trucks, and they, have a caravan going from state fair to state fair. And my grandfather and dad talk about all the state fairs they went to in the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and somewhat into the 60s as well. And these fairs would be timed up so that they would move from one fair to the other. And then back then you also had to stay quite a bit longer than you do now. Again, fairs have evolved, and now that we're more mobile and people have less time to spend the whole fair time there, and there are more animals as well.
Mm-hmm. And where was that circuit? If you were in Iowa, tell us about that journey.
Well, there were county fair circuits. So you would go from county fair to county fair. And I was never a part of that, so I don't know exactly what that particular circuit was. But when you think about the state fair, and then the Clay County Fair would happen, and then the Cattle Congress would happen. But there were also all those July county fairs that they could go to. There were open shows with those. And then there was also the state fair circuit. So they talked about going, and I don't know the order, but there was Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, and I'm sure you can link in any of the others around. We now go to just two. We used to go to Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. We could work those in with the way the sheep schedules worked. Now we just do Iowa and Minnesota.
Okay, yes.
But yeah, it used to be way more involved.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you suppose, or can you tell us, please, is the purpose of the National Cattle Congress? Like, what are its goals, and have they remained the same, or have they changed and evolved?
Well, the mission of the Cattle Congress is quite broad, because really the National Cattle Congress organization is a fair for just a few days a year. And the rest of the time, we're really a rental facility. And that's how we need to make our money, is to rent those facilities out. So our mission includes both agriculture, the arts, providing entertainment to the entire Midwest. And that really is encompassing of how the Cattle Congress evolved as well into an event that appealed to the more urban type audience and target audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What have you had to incorporate in the Cattle Congress in order to make it more attractive for city goers?
They want entertainment. So we did, for a while, we did some rodeos. Well, we were known back in the 50s for our entertainment. So my husband talks about, he was born in 54. And when he was a young child, his aunt and uncle brought him up from Columbus Junction to see the Lennon Sisters.
Oh.
So, and the Lawrence Welk Show. Lawrence Welk Show was really big at that time.
Yes.
And getting more, and Charley Pride might have bridged some. He might have been more of a 1960s, but all of those big performers. Bob Hope performed at the Electric Park Ballroom. There are pictures up of all Ricky Valley. I mean, all of the big names performed on those grounds, not necessarily during the fair, but at the Electric Park Ballroom. All of those were there. And so that really appeals to the more urban audience.
Sure.
They also want, what the number one thing that brings people to the Iowa State Fair is through their surveying? Do you have any idea what that is? The number one, by far, the number one thing?
At our state fair.
Yeah, at the Iowa State Fair.
Janine, is that the one that has the butter cow?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't. No.
Yeah. Food.
Food
Food is
butter.
by far the number one thing that people go to fairs for when they do the surveys. So we've had to work, and there used to be a lot more room at the Cattle Congress for food vendors. There were a lot more food vendors, but we're really focusing on that and getting different food vendors in, because that is a big draw. And you think about that back as fairs evolved and trying to bring in home arts. was another thing. Having competition for the ladies that brought quilts, jam, pies, all those traditional things you think of. That brought in a more urban environment, the more urban audience. The rides themselves for the kids. The kids need to be entertained, want to be entertained. So the rides, rocking around and picking things up from the different vendors and buying things from the different vendors, and the vacuum cleaner salesman, the books,
the Vitamix guy,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it really has evolved. And I was reading about back when they started the Cattle Congress, and they talk about all the farm machinery that used to be there, huge displays. Well, now you can go to your local dealer and see a lot of the machinery that the people needed to go to one place to see before. So that has changed as well. But and interestingly, so it talked about bringing these cattle in by rail, and people would flock. Even the city people would flock to the rail yards to watch these incredible cattle from the East Coast. I mean, you're talking about the Woolworth family and these big names that you would recognize. If I had a list of them, you would recognize these names of these big companies that had these large livestock herds that they ran around and showed. And people would flock to the railway to watch these cows get unloaded. It was a big deal. Nobody would do that sort of thing now. And it's
almost like a circus coming to town.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But,
So that brings.
Go ahead. Back on those foods in the 50s, were the food attractions mostly through church stands?
There were a lot of church stands. I remember when I was really little, there was a pancake stand that you would just sit. You can eat pancakes all day if you wanted to. There was a turkey stand there. We had the AMVETs had the noodle nook. It's its own little building, and that the noodles, that was the big thing. They have the noodles, and people want us to get that back. Well, that group doesn't want to do that anymore.
It's a lot of work.
I mean, it is. They looked at it. We told them about it. You've got this building there. You want to do something with it? And well, no, we don't really want to make noodles now. But people want the noodles because they remember that. Very nostalgic for them. The Tom Thumb donuts. They have a big. That's a big deal at the fairgrounds. The Tom Thumb donuts that are made right there. Can you imagine when that started? What an attraction that was.
Oh yes.
Watch those little donuts plop in there, get fried, and end up in your hand.
Did you say it's called Tom Thumb?
Tom Thumb donuts. The little tiny donuts. Yeah, get them in a little bag.
Were they vertical?
No, they're little tiny donuts.
Little midgets.
The little machine just plops them down.
I wonder how Tom Thumb got associated with that.
Wasn't Tom Thumb little?
He was little.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. Well, that's still probably our girls' one of their favorite stands to go to at State Fair.
Yes. It's very fun. People will now, these days, pull up to the front gate, and it's right near the front gate, and say, I just want to go in and buy a bag of Tom Thumb donuts. And then they drive away. And we let them go in. That's fine. Or vendors out. Come back later, do something else when there's something you want to see. So.
Yes. Is there an entertainment? Sorry, Jackie.
Okay. I'll remember it.
Okay. Is there a national gathering of fair boards where you select entertainments for your fair?
Entertainment is done through agents. So we work with agents, and interestingly, after COVID, it's harder to book them ahead of time, and they're trying. Also, they want to do a circuit, so that they want to try to line things up. So we already are setting our entertainment, and it's done independently. But you also want to know, and the agents will let you know. Well, you don't want, here's your list, and we'll say, well, what about so and so? Well, they're booked at another fair. You don't want that one nearby, but here's a list of other people. So it has to be done well in advance. And I imagine back in the day, I remember them talking about, there were a couple of people that would go to Las Vegas and see some entertainment and talk with the agents there. I remember a specific director that had talked about that. That would have been kind of cool, right? To go to Vegas and see these big time entertainers and try to book through through there. But now it's all done through agents, just by talking on the phone or through email.
Okay. So my question had to do with the judges. Is it your responsibility to find judges, or is that some other committee? Judges for cattle, judges for pies, a variety?
So right now, we have the former Iowa State Fair dairy superintendent is our dairy superintendent, and she lines up the dairy judges.
Okay.
She's incredible. She does a fantastic job for us, and we love Rhonda Guy. She's very, very knowledgeable and knows everybody. Our dairy show, and we only have our only livestock right now is dairy, because we don't have room for anything but that, because our dairy show is larger than the Iowa State Fair dairy show.
Oh.
And also we're working on improving our facilities, because we have barns that we really can't use anymore. People's expectations of where they can put their livestock at fairs is different than it was back in the 50s, the 20s. Some of these buildings were built in the 20s. So we're working on redoing our fairgrounds and putting in facilities that will attract more animals, and that will have more space for animals, so that we can have some additional shows.
Do you find that your fairgrounds is large enough to accommodate building buildings to bring in more livestock?
Yeah, we'll have to take some buildings down.
Okay.
And what we're thinking of is putting up multi-purpose buildings.
Oh, yeah.
So that we could have a livestock show, but then turn around and have a volleyball tournament, or have a car show, or any type of entertainment. With pickleball, something that we're able to move with the trends of the time, because our buildings are single-purpose livestock buildings right now, a lot of them, and they just don't work anymore.
Well, it would allow you to have events year-round then, wouldn't it?
Yes, have more events year-round. We have a lot of year-round events. We do, but we could have more if we had different facilities that would accommodate them. And Jackie, you asked about the judges for pies and that sort of thing. I actually run the home arts area during the shows, or during the fair, and I line up those judges.
I see.
I know I do judging, some of that 4-H judging. Janine knows about that, and so I know who those people are, and I line them up.
Do the judges for home arts primarily come from the Waterloo area, or do they travel a distance?
Yeah, our home arts area was relatively small, and I've been working on expanding it. And so I have the last 2 years, I kind of took that over and have grown it, really, especially growing on the baking side, a little bit at a time. We do a mayor's cookie jar contest, which was really big back in the day. The mayor actually would come in and see the cookies they had a judge, and they'd parade it, that jar, and he would ride, and it was a he, back then they were all he's, right? Ride the hippodrome. They had a parade every night of the parade of champions, and he would go on one of the big, we had draft horses were big. Back in the day, we had a big draft horse show. He would ride on one of the hitches with his cookie jar, with the winner, and that was a big thing. Well, we brought that back, and we get 2 local mayors to be part of the panel with basically a certified foods judge, someone that's very knowledgeable on what you should be looking for, because the mayors are like, this tastes good. Yeah, about baking cookies. Boy, these really taste good. Whereas the judge would be like, well, you need to look at this or this or this. That's really great. We do want them to taste good. That's one of the criteria. But so we bring in 2 mayors. We have had Mayor Hart from Waterloo, a Mayor Green who didn't run again this last year, from Cedar Falls, the mayor from Evansdale, excuse me. So we mix that up. And in fact, Mayor Hart said, when he judged 2 years ago, and he said, Deb, he pulled me aside afterwards, Deb, this is like my favorite thing at the fair. Please ask me back again. But then he couldn't. His cousin was getting married this last year, so that's become a big event and it's really fun. And we auction those off for our friends at the NCC 501c3. That's what we use to raise money for our new fairground renovations.
Oh, good.
So all the proceeds of that event go to our 501c3.
Do you find that when you have celebrity judges that is more of a draw for both entries and for an audience?
Yes. Yeah. It's really fun. It's really fun to listen to people that don't know a lot about judging and what they think. And it's really a lot of fun. Really fun. The judges just have a blast. And they all have said, please ask me back. And even Mayor Green this year said, I'm not running for re-election, but maybe if you ask the other mayor, the new mayor, he won't be available. And he'll so it's really a fun event. Those old time things, the fashion shows. Remember my mom, they actually have a picture, which you wanted her to come out of a washing machine or a dryer. We wanted her to come out of a dryer or maybe it's a washing machine. And she has her legs stuck up in this. The fashion shows were really big back then. That was a kind of an advertisement, having her this picture of her coming out of this dryer or washer. So yeah. And
so are you saying?
Yeah.
Are there fashion shows now?
Not anymore. No, that you don't see fashion shows. I remember I was in some fashion shows, 20 years ago. But you don't see those as much anymore. There's so much online now.
Say it again.
Yeah. There's so much online now these days. You can see so much more by going online. Before you didn't have that. I mean, you would just think through newspapers or in person, so going to the store. But now you see things online.
Yes. Deb, the National Cattle Congress had a different name when it first started. Is that correct?
Yeah. First it was the State Dairy Show was the first name. I can't remember. Excuse me, and I'm not remembering the specific name. It became the National Dairy Cattle Congress.
Okay.
So the National Dairy Shows started in Waterloo, and there's this. I'm gonna hold up. There's this book that you can get access to it online. It's done by the Iowa. If I might say it right, the State Historical Society of Iowa. And I'm gonna move this through. Maybe
can you hold it up? Just hold it up a little bit.
Yeah, let me figure out that. There we go.
Yes, and up a little higher.
Okay, up a little higher.
Almost.
Yeah, yes. And this was one of many series of books that they did. And this particular one, it is the August 1972 publication of it. Again, I looked at it online. I shared it with Janine online the other day. But it is all about the Dairy Cattle Congress, the National Dairy Cattle Congress, up until that point.
Okay.
And it really, and it has some really cool pictures in it, talks about the history of the, and in fact, I just want to show this one because it has my grandfather in it. But it talks about the evolution of the Dairy Cattle Congress, and started out as this dairy show. And then it needed to evolve because the local area, there were other species of livestock, beef, sheep, pigs, that also wanted a place to show. And it was called the Waterloo Meat Animal Show.
Oh.
But adding those different things, and there was a huge national draft horse show. There were society horses that showed. But adding those, the dairy people are like, this isn't our national show anymore. Yeah. There was a little house across the street where it was a shrine. It was called a particular name. And that was the National Dairy Shrine. It's where they put all their history, and people would stay overnight upstairs. And it was a big deal. Well, then they felt like they were getting the short end of the stick. It wasn't all about them anymore. And so in the 60s, if I recall the timing right, in the 60s, they said, a group of them got together from Wisconsin and said, we need our own show. And so the World Dairy Expo began in Madison and pulled all those national shows to Madison. And that's a huge, huge event. And in fact, if you go to their website, again, it's the National Dairy, the Dairy Expo, go to their website and pull down in that there's a history. And a gentleman wrote a book about the history on the 50th anniversary, about the history of the World Dairy Expo. And the beginning of it is all about the Cattle Congress and how it started as the National Dairy Cattle Congress. and they're great pictures in the history of the Dairy Cattle Congress and that evolution, and then moves into the World Dairy Expo. But there's a picture here, if I can get it up.
Oh, nice cow.
So the gentleman, I got to do this the right way. There's a gentleman in the background. That is my grandfather.
Okay. Did your family dairy then in that era?
Yeah, but he didn't show. We had grade cattle, so we couldn't have shown there. But my grandfather was on the board, and then when my grandfather passed away, my dad was asked to join the board, and then when I moved to Waterloo, I was asked to join the board. Okay. So my dad is no longer on the board, but I am.
Why was Waterloo, Iowa chosen for a national dairy show?
So it's interesting reading about it in this book that I just showed you, because it talks just about that. There was a big contest between different towns about who would get this state dairy show, and Waterloo, and it kind of moved around for a little while. The precursor to the official state dairy show kind of moved around from town to town, and then in 1909, Waterloo said, "We want the show." And they got it. And at that time they said, well, we want to keep it in one place. Who's going to get it? And there was this big contest between 3 or 4 different cities about who would get it. And Waterloo stepped forward with all the businesses got behind it and put money up front and said, we will give you this much money. We will do these things. We're going to make this a super show. We're going to, and they're like, great. Oh, this is great. And then they kept doing that. These businesses would step forward because they would get 100,000 people in the 1920s.
Wow.
Now we can get at a high about 80, maybe 100,000 if we have a super good year at the Cattle Congress now. But back then, that's a lot of people.
Yes, yes.
That is a lot of people.
So when exhibitors came back to the show back then, or to the fair, where did they stay in trucks? Did they sleep in the straw? Were there were motels used for lodging for that time by exhibitors?
It's interesting that is also in there. People would actually open their homes.
Oh, okay.
To people to get this show to be here. They would open their homes. They would get a list of people. I'm sure there were, certain motels or inns, probably inns or rooming houses. I'm sure were full. I'm sure people slept in the barns, maybe even in the stalling area or near their vehicles. Of course, they came by rail. You didn't have that. But yeah, they would stay wherever they could. But there was a big push to get lists of people that would host them in their home. These people in their homes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were, I've been a part of something like that when my 4-H days when we were livestock judging, and people would open their homes. This was the North Dakota Winter Show. And, we got so attached to the homeowners, especially if they were little grandmas who were opening their homes, that we just requested to have that same lodging area time after time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. That's cool.
Yep.
So what were we may have covered this already, some of the prominent activities of fairs. In other words, how are they different from the 50s till now? You've touched on a few. So food was important, and activities as far as entertainment.
Right.
Are there, what is required of entertainers now that was not required by them in the 50s?
Oh, I don't know that there's anything different required for them. There are more different acts. Like we also not only had big acts come in, but you have little traveling acts or magic shows or pig races. You wouldn't have seen that back in the day. I remember at the Wisconsin State Fair, there was a donkey that would jump off into a pool. And yeah, so I'm sure that they've evolved in order to attract different people. And we have had tiger shows. So different. It's really different, and it depends on what's out there. Who's willing to travel and do those things? Right now, fairs are having trouble because they can't get workers for the carnivals. Yeah, and those travel, and there are fewer of them than there used to be.
I guess I was thinking more of the electronics and the lighting, and all the
right.
computer, a lot of computers are used today in the performance or
You're right.
backstage. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
you'd have to have a certain strong electrical system or you'll blow the tube,
Yeah. Yeah. Good thought. Yeah, that's absolutely true, because we actually, some will come with their own lighting and sound. The ones that we get, we provided that, and it's set up for the same one. And also interestingly, the hippodrome was used for both livestock and entertainment, but we put up a new livestock arena so that we could show the livestock outside the hippodrome, because it's so hard to set up all the chairs and the platform, all that equipment that costs a lot more than it used to, I'm sure. And so, yeah, we built this arena. It's actually the Pullen-Simonson Arena. It was partially named after my grandfather. And so that the livestock could be shown in a different area. And people don't want to walk through the tan bark, the manure. I mean, we try to get as much of that as you can, but people's expectations have changed a lot.
Yes.
And
Yes.
And that's what my parents are having trouble sometimes with, all of the changes we want to do at the Cattle Congress, but the expectations are different than they used to be.
So is there anyone in your family, your siblings or your children or grandchildren who might want to continue in that big business that your family's been in for so long?
We'll have to see.
Okay.
We'll have to see.
Yes.
Still waiting.
It's a big commitment. It's a lot of work. I mean, Janine and I were just talking. We're going through lambing right now, and with it's the warm weather. That's really cool. The sheep there hasn't been the cold that we had, so our ewes aren't in the right condition because they didn't go through the cold snap, so they're a little fatter than they should be, which leads to pregnancy disease, and there are just a lot of issues we're running into. You think it'd be easier, and it's a lot of work. It's raising livestock is a lot of work.
It's heart. It's got to be from the heart.
Yeah.
24 hours plus.
Yes, I don't want to commit any of my family members to doing something like that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I'm curious, Deb, going back on the fairs in Iowa, the main fairs, the fairs that in my mind that people travel to would be the Iowa State Fair. It would be the Cattle Congress, and it would be the Clay County Fair. And
the Mississippi Valley Fair in the Quad.
Oh, where's that?
In the Quad Cities. It's in Davenport.
Oh,
those are the biggest ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Back in that day, the All Iowa Fair occurred in Cedar Rapids as well. That was a big one.
Yes.
It went by the wayside quite a while ago.
Okay. And did they all start about the same era then, and with the same purpose in mind?
I don't know the histories of all those fairs, but I'm sure the State Fair started as the same thing, right? And centrally located in Des Moines in the state.
And it originally started in Fairfield, didn't it? And then I think moved to Des Moines. Yes. Yeah. How other than auctioning off cookies, how does your fair, or how are you able to have enough finances to build buildings and to keep up with the fairgrounds?
That is very, very difficult for any fair these days, because it just doesn't happen. A lot of it's through donations. When you think about the Iowa State Fair, the Blue Ribbon Foundation is very significant. They get a lot of donations. They also get appropriations from the state of Iowa when they need to do facility improvements. I know there's a fair near us that the Farm Bureau is going to pay for a new building for them.
Nice.
So capital improvements are so difficult for fairs, because you just unless you can really rent those buildings out for a lot of money,
right?
Like every weekend, all the time,
you
just can't make enough money to support the fairs. So it's really we're really ramping up donations and talking with government officials about how we might be able to get grants, because you have to get really creative.
Right. I was just thinking of grants too. So what types who offers grants for such a thing?
So there's Destination Iowa. The Iowa Department of Economic Development has some different programs. One of them we're talking right now about possibilities there. You also corporate sponsors are another way to get sponsorships. We're very lucky in Waterloo. We have some very strong foundations here in town that are very good to the community. So that's another place that we could possibly go to get some money, but there's not enough. We're also talking with some government officials at the national level about possibly getting some money at the national level for a big, one-time improvement to the grounds and what that could look like.
Do you find your board members are primarily associated with the agriculture industry?
Yes, we only have 2 people on our board that are ag people.
Oh, okay.
That have strong, there are some other people that, there's another person that his family is an agriculture family, but he's an architect. But it's harder and harder to find those. And also being in an urban environment, we need to be cognizant of how we serve the whole community.
Yes.
And how to get, to think through that box as well. Through the whole box, not just part of the box.
Yes.
Beyond the box.
Beyond the box. Exactly. Beyond the box. That's even better.
I think that they have a great leader in you to help.
Certainly
I help move forward with that.
Yes. I hope I can be helpful.
And your family as well. Well, viewers, we have been talking with Deb Pullen-VanAuken, born in the 60s. By golly, she knows her 50s history, whether it be with her family and showing registered Hampshire sheep, or in talking about the beginnings of the National Cattle Congress in Waterloo, Iowa. We thank you, Deb, for being a part of our fun chat today. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie, how can you close our show today?
Well, today I'll just remind our viewers to put your little finger on, or the cursor on, the red button. That's the subscribe button. And also the blue thumbs up button. We'd appreciate that. And until next time, tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until then, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.